everyone. Thanks so much for listening to Musicast. This is a reminder that if you know someone who would be a great guest on the show, you should go to the F-Flat Books website, click on any of our blog posts, and click on the nomination form. You can also send us information directly by emailing musicast@fflatbooks.com.
All right, folks, thanks for listening again. Our guest this time is Kirsten C. Kunkle. How are you, Kirsten? Thanks for being with us.
Doing great. I'm so happy to be here. It's nice to meet you guys.
It's nice to meet you, too. And so one of the things that we've tried to do in the short few episodes that we've done is we could read bios and things like that, but since we have people here, you're obviously the most well-versed in yourself. So if you wouldn't mind, could you give us a little background about who you are, where you started, and things like that?
Sure. So I'm from Fremont, Ohio, originally, which is a small city about an hour from the Michigan border, a little further from the Indiana border. So Northwest Ohio. And my mother was a pianist and also a ballerina. And my father was a psychologist, and my mother was also a psychologist. And very early on, she introduced both my brother and me to piano and dance and art and music in general. And so I played piano early on in my childhood. And then I played clarinet and violin in school. And when I was about 12, I started taking voice lessons. And it just became my thing. I fell in love with opera early on. I was in my first opera when I was 13. And I grew up on musical theater. So I did a lot of community theater growing up, and I just always loved to sing, and I loved performing. So I kind of became this singing actor, did a lot of musical theater, did a lot of things that were not conventional paths to get to where I'm at. I went to Bowling Green State University for my undergrad in voice performance. And then I went to University of Michigan directly after for my master's and doctorate. From there, I started teaching collegiate level, and I did 3 adjunct jobs over the state of Ohio, along with the church job in 1 year, and that was insanely busy. And then I taught at Shorter College for 2 years, taught at Lincoln University in Oxford, PA for about 4 years. And then I took a big leap of faith and started performing and freelancing and teaching on the side, and also doing a lot of things like editing articles and writing for journals and all sorts of things that eventually culminated in co-founding an opera company as well as performing. And so now I work a full-time day job. I have an infant who is being watched by my husband at the moment. And I also have an opera company that I'm the artistic director of and co-founded. And I sing regularly. So I'm pretty busy, and I love it. I love being busy. I love being busy with music. And that is my background in a nutshell. So feel free to ask me about anything in particular. I'd be happy to go on about any details.
So now, I'm a saxophone player. I spend more time in like the band side of things and the jazz side of things. And admittedly, when I was in school, opera was one of those that and really a lot of classical stuff, I kind of had like a harder time finding my way to, just because of different things. What was your gate and your opening into the opera and that ballet? It's such, because I think there's such an appreciation for it, but I also, at a young age, I know it's challenging for people. What was your opening to that?
Sure. So my mother always loved everything classical, but she didn't know opera at all. My father would rebuild pianos, but he couldn't play an instrument. And so, I was surrounded by this and a lot of art, but I didn't know opera. I did know musical theater. And so when I went to take my very first voice lesson, my mother had asked around, tried to find somebody that had a good reputation, but also really would be careful with a young singer. So I was 12 when I had my first lesson. And I went in there and I sang musical theater, and I played with the dog, and, I just had a good time. And the teacher said, there's a voice there, and I think it could be a classical voice. Okay, that sounded fun, And then she recommended that I go to a couple auditions once I'd learned a few songs. And she also sent me to see my first opera. So my first opera I ever saw was Faust at Toledo Opera. And the spectacle of it just blew me away. I was astonished and amazed and just so impressed. And, you know, it was a full grand scale, completely staged opera. And I had seen musicals. I had seen plenty of musicals. But I loved how beautiful it was. I loved the scenery and the makeup and the hair and the chorus. And I remember thinking at one point, wow, what if I could do that? That's the pinnacle. That's the height. If I could do that, that would be amazing. And so I've always been the kind of person that goes for broke. I want to take myself all the way to the end of the challenge, whatever that challenge might be. I think that's why I got a doctorate so young. I was 26 when I finished, because I just felt the need to push through until I had that terminal degree. And so the same kind of thing for opera. It was the most challenging thing I could do vocally. And so because it was so hard and so almost unattainable, I also found it really appealing. But the fact that it was beautiful too really made me fall in love with it. So kind of in a full circle moment, last February, I believe, so 2 Februaries ago, I got to finally play Marguerite and Faust, and it was just so cool to have that happen, you know, in my life after having fallen in love with that role when I was 12 or 13 years old.
Now, I'm curious if you have any advice, because obviously you had a teacher and you had supportive parents, and they kind of assisted in helping you find this path. I think there's such a reluctancy for the general public to go see an opera. And I mean, you hear about it as I'm a classical violinist. So you hear about, you know, classical music is dying, and these companies are going to be shut down. And how do you think we can encourage, you know, everybody, but particularly young kids who are kind of finding their path in life, to experience something that their parents certainly aren't chomping at the bit to take them to?
That's really the ultimate question, isn't it? Especially as educators. It's a really hard question to answer. I can give you what I've been trying to do, and I don't know that it's the actual answer, but what I've done is that through the opera company, it's called Wilmington Concert Opera, and it's only 4 years old. But one of the main things that we've tried to do is be approachable and say as often as possible publicly, opera is for everyone. We keep our tickets non-existent. We are free for anything that we produce, so that we can encourage families to come. We always have super titles for our complete operas because we do original language. We do as much outreach as possible. So, you know, if there are community events, we make sure to try to participate. We've done things like an ice cream festival in Wilmington, Delaware, and we didn't sing opera. We intentionally sang musical theater, some pop crossover stuff with our opera singers, doing it in a correct style, but maybe a voice that some of these children had never heard before, that kind of thing. And then we always make sure that we're approachable so that we can talk to our audiences. We highly encourage people to bring their kids, even if they're going to cry, even if they're going to get upset. We would rather have families in our audience and exposing their children to this music than have a perfect recording. For us, it's much more about having these families experience something that is different for them, that's cultural, that's based in the arts, and also is something that they can do as a family. We try intentionally also to do some of our productions in a location that's a little bit more, perhaps less economically sound, you know, so that there are lower income families around. We'll perform in churches that might be absolutely beautiful, but they're in historically underrepresented areas, you know, so that we can get poorer families in that couldn't normally pay for tickets, or we can get people who can't afford childcare to come and bring their families and offer a free event so that they have something they can do besides wondering what to do with their kids all day on a weekend. So, you know, that's something that we try to do. As far as overall, I think the more approachable we can be, the better. The more we can just get out there and say, hey, I sing opera and you should try it. You should check it out. We have YouTube clips everywhere. Everyone does, right? And so if we can share what we're doing and get one or two people to listen that aren't listening otherwise, and they happen to share it with their kids, that's even better. I think there's a lot of videos going around now where you'll see people listening to some recording artist for the first time. You guys have probably seen those online, and they're so popular. And I think because they've started doing that, they'll do things like Dolly Parton, and on the other hand, they'll do something like Pavarotti. You know, I think it's kind of opening some doors that, you know, opera isn't just for old elitists. It's for anyone who wants to hear it. I've done a Mull and the Night Visitors like 5 times, and I think it's a great gateway for young children to see opera. It's, you know, short, it's in English, it's a nice Christmas story, and I think that that's something that I like to try to do as much as I can personally, because that way I can talk to kids after the shows and see if they like it. And I think a lot of times people are surprised. They don't think they'll like it, but then they go to one, or they see a part of a scene or something online, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's actually really interesting. That's like a soap opera with music. That's exactly what it is. That's all it is. And sometimes they're racy, and sometimes they're exciting, and sometimes they're bold. You know, it just depends, but the drama's always there. It's just a matter of opening the door so that people can see it.
I think that's such a wonderful approach, because I feel like so many companies, opera companies, say, kind of give the impression that, like, well, if you don't like us, that's your fault. But it seems like your approach is an inward look at what you guys are doing. How can we encourage people to come? How can we do that sort of thing? Because I was fortunate enough to study abroad in Vienna, and I remember, like, one of my friends drug me to the opera, and I was in Vienna, so, like, yes, of course, let's go experience it. And I bought my €3 ticket, and I stood through an opera, and that was it. Like, that was it. I was hooked. I was at the opera multiple nights a week. I stood through the entire ring cycle. Like,
wow, that's commitment.
Thank you. I had
back to back.
No, come on now.
Okay.
It was like over the whole semester, but
I wanted to know how committed you were.
Fairly committed.
I'm messing with you.
But I mean, like, it really did, though. It took a fair amount of convincing for a classical musician to go to an opera. And so I think your approach, though, is so wonderful, because you're reaching out to the community instead of having that attitude of, well, if you don't like us, that's your fault. You know, you weren't brought up properly or whatever. So sure. I think that's just awesome.
And
sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Absolutely.
I was just going to say, I think it's even more vitally important now than ever with the pandemic going on that, you know, we have to bring art to the masses, because no one can go anywhere. I mean, we're not going to be singing publicly, at least in the US, for quite a while in an closed environment. Not just an opera house, but churches and lots of places that we just can't sing in public. I'm singing a couple outdoor concerts, and it's been amazing to get to sing for any audience at all, because while we might be able to do more with some instruments, we're not going to be able to sing just because of the nature of of COVID-19. But I think one thing I've been trying to do personally is get as much content out via Facebook and Instagram as possible, through the company, but also myself. And I think that some people might see it as a little gratuitous, but I think it's necessary right now. I think it's the only art that we're getting. If we want to create new art, it has to be virtual at this point, you know? So most people, I would say the vast majority of people, have that at their disposal, and a lot of people have a lot of time on their hands. So I'm hoping that, you know, that will open some doors for the arts in general too, that people who are bored might click on a link they might not look at otherwise.
It speaks a lot to the process that Marissa mentioned and you were speaking of too, in terms of the, and obviously we all agree that there's nothing like live music and performance and things like that, but the willingness to adapt to the circumstances we're in is something that is revitalizing things that were not necessarily as prevalent in the mainstream right now, and it's like the perfect time to take advantage of that. And you mentioned, I was wondering if you just might be able to speak a little bit more when you mentioned when you had social nights and you sang but you purposely didn't sing opera and you sang musical theater instead. What's the benefit of them hearing of an operatic voice performing something more like mainstream approachable, for lack of a better way of saying that?
Well, I mean, you've all heard opera singers who try to sing pop music and they can't, and it doesn't sound good. That's not what we're going for. What we're going for is people who can be versatile, so that they can appeal to many people, appeal to the masses. So if you hear someone who's classically trained, ideally they should be able to be versatile enough to perform something that is legit musical theater. They might be able to belt. It depends on the person and the training they've had. So, I think for that particular event, I know that we had our mutual friend Krista actually sang for that one, and she sang a piece that ended up belting all the way through it. And the fact of the matter is she was doing it healthily, and the fact that she could sing healthily and do that shows people a different side than what they might hear on the radio or, somebody singing at a karaoke night. Not to say that those people aren't doing something healthily, but the odds are that she will sing it healthily and they may not. So I think it's more that than it is that they need to hear an opera singer sing something they've heard, if that makes sense. I don't want to hear someone that sings opera only exclusively, doesn't really know how to sing pop, sing a Lady Gaga song. But if someone can do that and it's in their wheelhouse, then great, go for it, do it. Let's find stuff that shows you off, and then you can also show off what you do classically. And that might appeal to somebody that has never heard that before or never really thought, hey, maybe you don't have to pigeonhole a singer. We've all seen American Idol or The Voice, and they say, oh, well, you're a country singer, you have to sing country. Well, okay, but if you're on a musical theater stage, you need to be able to sing it all. And I think that's fairly well known in the singer community. I don't think that's well known in the general public.
I think to the point of singing healthily is such a huge thing, because I mean, and again, to call back to where we're at now, and people are absorbing things digitally and online and things like that. Like there's no one in front of you telling you that's not right. And if you're going and you're mimicking these people you're hearing, and you're 11, 12 years old, you don't have what they have, like they're gonna hurt themselves, and they're gonna do that in a way that instrumentalists don't feel it in the same way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I've had a number of students come to me that, they want to be ready for an audition, or they want a lesson or two. That happens a lot. And they expect you to be able to fix all of their problems in a lesson or two. And I'm sure you guys get that too. But it happens a lot with singers, especially people that want to sing pop music, or people that want to do an audition for like a performing arts high school, and they just want to get in. And then they figure, oh, well, then I'll study with that teacher. Okay, that's fine. But a lot of them don't realize that they are indeed imitating a recording, and they're not singing with their own voice at all. They have no idea what they're doing pedagogically. And that's why you need more than a couple lessons for that audition, whatever that audition might be. And you guys know all about that with, instruments too. It's important to have the right technique no matter what you're doing. So, yeah.
So we keep referencing, and I know you talked about it a little bit when you introduced yourself, but you founded your own opera company. So I think we're all incredibly curious to know, what was that process like in terms of being, a business owner, a founder, but then also a female in this pursuit, and kind of where are you now with all of that?
Sure. So I have a partner. Her name's Marissa Robinson. She's our executive director. So it happened very organically. We did not plan to open an opera company and start our own endeavor. what happened, and I'll give you the shortest version I can. I had been scheduled to sing Carmen in a small company in Chicago, and it was canceled. So that same summer, Marissa also had an opening in her schedule. So we talked about, well, what could we do to fill that time, give ourselves a project? And it ended up getting pushed to the fall, but we did Suor Angelica, Puccini's Suor Angelica. And we knew there would be enough women in the area who were very good singers that aren't getting the opportunities they would like to have. So we were able to recruit a number of very good female singers. And that's probably the main reason we chose that particular piece, because there are no men except for in the chorus that we cut that part, the men's part. So after we did that, it went so well. It went really well. We did one performance in Wilmington. We decided to call ourselves Wilmington Concert Opera to make it sound legitimate. And at the time, it was just a group of people that wanted to sing. And we found a pianist who was willing to play for donations. And once we were done and it went really well, the audience said, "Okay, so what's next? This was great." And the singer said, "Okay, what's next? This was great." And we said, "Oh boy, I guess we have to come up with something else." So we ended up doing a gala showcase, and that just kind of went from one to another, that we now had a second season where we also did a full opera and another gala. And so now we've done a number of shows, 4 full seasons, and then of course COVID got in the way. But now we're doing at-home content, both a concert for the Delaware Community Foundation to raise funds for them with our singers, and then also at-home content for many of our followers. Anyone who has any art they're doing, does not have to be music, that we would like to showcase them, so we're doing that. We also have a recital series we've started with some of our singers and some people we've reached out to that can safely record with someone they either live with or someone they work with. And we have something else in the works that we are working on raising funds for that I can't quite divulge yet. So that is how that all happened. So we didn't plan for any of this, but by the time we got around to our 3rd year, we said, okay, this has to become a legitimate endeavor if we're going to do this. So we got our nonprofit status, and we started raising money with grants, and Marissa does all of that. So I deal more with the people, with all the social media, all the networking, that kind of thing. And she does all the behind the scenes things, all the money, all the grant writing and all that. And we balance our skill sets very well that way. So, your typical artistic director versus executive director duties. Anyway, so being women in the field, I noticed that in your questions, and I thought, yeah, I guess that is pretty odd, isn't it? I never really thought of it that way. We do talk about being a women-run business, and I'm also Native American, so we talk about it being a Native, a minority-run business too, both of which are, not exactly prevalent. When you start an opera company, you don't think, oh, well, there aren't that many women doing that, but there really aren't that many women doing it. So, it has been good. It's been really good that my business partner knows exactly what I've gone through, and she goes through the same things. We're both sopranos too, so we've both not been cast an awful lot. So we've been on both sides, and I think that that's really helpful to be both business partners but also both singers, so that we can really understand what every singer is going through. We try to intentionally be more aware of people with family issues. We've had a number of people bring their children to rehearsals because they don't have childcare, and that's fine. That's fine. They're usually better behaved than, some of the people we've worked with in the past. Not in our company, of course. Everyone we work with, if they get asked back, they're exemplary colleagues. But yeah, so I think we're more family aware than perhaps some other companies are. We definitely focus on a really high caliber of singer that will be an excellent colleague. If you're not an excellent colleague, we don't want to work with you. It doesn't matter how good of a singer you are. We also want people who are going to be really pleasant to be around to the other people, not just great that you came prepared and you know your music ahead of time, but that you can joke around and be friendly and be pleasant and be nice to whoever you're working with at all times. And while this all sounds very obvious, you'd be amazed at how many companies don't focus that way. And so I think that we've been very successful because we intentionally try to make it a familial feel while keeping the standards incredibly high. So I think that that's kind of our key to success. We treat everybody like their family, but we expect them to bring their A game at all times.
I think that there's, and we've had this with a few of our other interviewees that we've spoken to, there's kind of this really interesting look in terms of what companies or foundations or programs or anything have been made out of the desire to make a company or a program or foundation versus ones that almost they happened upon, like
Okay.
in a way that like, ooh, we're here and we didn't realize it, because the intentions are so much purer. And it's interesting to think about if you would have sat down prior to that initial start and just said, do you want to take on starting this opera company? Like how much different that would have looked like. And when it gets born so much more organically, I think the intentions stay much more level and true to the why it's existing, not the benefit of a program or a business existing.
Sure. I mean, it's never been about money for us. It can't be about money because, we've put out an awful lot of our own money, and it's only recently we've been able to pay our singers. We've kept it piano only at this point, probably for the foreseeable future, because paying our singers has been a big deal. As instrumentalists, you guys might not realize singers don't always get paid in the opera field. It's really hard to get paying jobs unless you're at some of the bigger places. You've got management, things like that. The pianists and the instrumentalists tend to get paid. The singers, not so much. And I think that that's a problem in our field. It's singers, people assume that, oh, you're a singer, so you have fun and you enjoy it and it's not work. But it is work. It's a lot of work. And, you need to know your languages and you need to have your technique. And we have to go to these, pay to sings if we're not getting hired right out of school. I did pay to sings until I was in my 30s. I mean, with a doctorate. That's kind of ridiculous. But at the same time, if you want to sing, you have to follow the mold, So now we are really excited that, we can pay. We don't pay a lot, but we can pay. We're a grassroots company, and that's a big deal in the opera world. So, you're right. If we had planned it as a business venture, I don't think it would have worked. It had to happen on its own.
Is there, beyond your group, does it look like there's any kind of effort for that makeup to change, this idea of, because I mean that seems like seems like a really hard bridge to break in terms of that, because
it is so hard.
it's like one person might not want to, but if you will pay to sing,
it's true. Yeah, it's very true. I mean, no one likes it, right? No one likes that that's the way it is, but it's also been a thing that I don't see it changing unless the overall shape of the larger companies changes. You have young artist programs. The difference between a training program and a young artist, I don't know how much of this overlaps with the instrumental world, is that training programs, you are probably paying to sing. If you are a young artist, you are probably being paid to sing, but it's more like a training program that you're probably singing chorus, covering some roles, doing outreach events, meeting with all of the donors, things like that. And you're probably not being paid a living wage on any scale. You're being paid very little. A lot of the bigger companies still do that, and it is a rite of passage. I mean, if you are a singer, you want to get in a young artist program. I didn't ever do one. It wasn't for lack of trying. I just never got in one. So, I mean, like I said, I'm a soprano. I'm a bigger voice soprano, so it took me a long time to really start to settle into my voice. I couldn't do that at 22 or 24 or even 26 or 27 like some people could. If you get Merila or the Met Young Artist Program, that will open doors for you. And, you have to realize that it's not about the money. It's about opening the doors that are going to get you management. They're going to get you auditions. They're going to have you meet the donors or the patrons that will open those doors for you. So I was fortunate enough that I was getting work doing smaller things, so that I built my resume that way, doing a lot of regional things, doing a lot of theater that crossed over into opera, immersive theater, a lot of brand new works and things like that, so that I built my resume in my own way and was able to take it to audition for management. And that's how I got my management. But a lot of people don't do it that way. That's not the most conventional way. I think the more conventional way is you go through these paths, you find a young artist program, you audition for management through those programs or through someone you meet through those programs. So because that's kind of the process, I think more and more people who really want to sing and will stick with it, because it's incredibly hard to stick with it, will either find an unconventional path, or they will do something that takes them not necessarily to full-time singing. I don't think that many people sing full-time. I think a lot of people teach. A lot of people will teach voice lessons only on the side too, while they still perform. A lot of people are perfectly happy just doing that, and they find that that's where they're best suited, and then they'll perform occasionally. And that's great. And a lot of people can find that they can have families that way a little bit easier and not be on the road all the time. But as far as these hoops, I don't know that that is going to be anything people can solve anytime soon. I think that truly with COVID happening, I think that might be the big impetus to change a lot of that, because people aren't going to be willing to spend the money like they might have, or spend the time dealing with situations where they're not being heard.
Well, and I mean, I was thinking the same thing when you said, based on COVID and the situation we're in, because this is, I think, the people that are open to unconventional paths or being a little more creative with how they get there are the ones that, and it's like you said, it's not a gap that's going to be closed in overnight and things like that, but
Sure.
the field has never been like open enough to gain ground in the way that it probably is now in the circumstances we find ourselves in.
So what I think will happen is that because so many of the bigger companies are struggling right now, what will probably happen is that you're going to get more grassroots, smaller companies like Wilmington Concert Opera and those, where people are bringing together friends to sing. They're going to start doing things where they can do smaller group things. They can do Liederabends, in backyards and things like that, until we have a workable vaccine for all of this. And once we have a vaccine for all of this, there's no guarantee people will take it and get it. So, I think that is scary for singers. It's very scary that if the vast majority of people aren't willing to do this, how are we going to have audiences again? How are we going to be back on stage and do fully staged productions where you are embracing people and kissing people on stage? Like, you can't do that right now. You literally cannot do that. So I think that is all going to be something that's going to have to be reinvented. I think that a lot of it will happen virtually, but I think we're also going to get smaller groups that want to do live performances any way they can, and they will find the way to do that. And I don't think the future of opera is necessarily in the big houses. I hope they don't go away, but I don't think that's necessarily the direction things will go for the foreseeable future.
So with that in mind, I know that beyond performing, you do push things in terms of compositions and commissions and things like that. Where has this practically taken those thoughts of commissions and compositions for you?
Oh, wow. So because I don't think anyone could have even envisioned what was going to happen to all of us in March, where we would be now. It hasn't been that long, but wow, have things changed, and technology has gotten so much better already. I mean, I never had a Zoom call before all of this. You guys might have, I never did. And I've had plenty since. So we've got sound jack technology and all this other stuff coming along. That's really exciting. So already I've worked with a couple composers, and those composers have reached out to me with, their piano tracks to say, would you be interested in recording this with my track? Now, that's karaoke, right? That's just karaoke. But all of a sudden, because you're working with a pianist who's doing their own track, and you have an opera singer who's willing to sing with it, it somehow is elevated, and we're still creating art any way we can. So I've done that a little bit already. And, I did this recording of a contemporary tango from my bedroom, who would have ever thought I would do something like that? Not me, but there are ways to make it a little more interesting and a little more exciting than what we ever could maybe even do with a piano in a recital hall. So I think that that's exciting. I mean, I have one composer I'm working with now who asked me to do 6 songs and do a mini recital and do a stream, and I never would have even thought of that before. As far as commissions, I mean, I think they're happening right and left. As far as I'm going, like I mentioned to you guys, I had written a libretto. I wrote a libretto for fun. I wrote it for fun because I was bored, and it had been in my mind, and it was something I kind of wanted to do. And I've got a composer looking at it, and I hope it turns into something. I really do. And if it does, even better. That something good artistically came out of all of this, that we can say, 2020 might have been a really hard year, but this is what I did. Check it out. So I think that because we're all so passionate about creating in any way we can, we're finding ways to do it. And I think this might be the time for art song. I really do. We can't do full-scale operas like we used to. I think that, small chamber music and art song, this is the time, solo repertoire. Let's do it. Let's get it out there. Let's create new things. Why not? There's no reason not to, and there's not a better time. So
I love this whole commentary just because, so we're both public school teachers, and, we've kind of decided, the big concert's not going to happen. Anything that we try to make comparable to the big concert is just not going to live up to it. It's not what people know and love. So let's just change the narrative and do things completely differently. And I think that's an attitude that a lot of people have difficulty adopting. But I think we're seeing, though, that the people who are able to change paths and try these new things and say, well, we can't do that, but look at all of these other things that we haven't been doing for so long. Let's explore those. Let's give the community what they've been missing. Let's give the students what they haven't been, doing in class or whatever. So I think it's actually, in a lot of ways, interesting, but also really nice for this change of pace. Acknowledging that we are in a pandemic, and obviously that's not great, but
yeah, I think so too. I think we need to be open to whatever the possibilities are. And I think it's these creative ideas that we might not have had otherwise are really exciting. I never thought I'd write a libretto, and here I am, and if it takes off, even better. I mean, how exciting would that be if something that was not my primary thing, all of a sudden, because it was interesting to me, is able to be a bigger part of who I am as an artist and as a person,
I think when you talk about too, you mentioned before, there's the stigma of like the elitist kind of thing with opera. It's one of those, and like you said, there's so many videos now of like people reacting to different music and seeing things they haven't listened to. When you look, like if you would look at a momentary snapshot in opera and you have this like preconceived, it's elitist thing, you hear a different language and you see the spectacle and it might put people off. But now in this moment, like you said, because of necessity of where we're at though, you're taking what's at the base of it, and it's that beauty in the music, and going, cool. So now this is a person that is just like you in their kitchen, in their living room, whatever, doing it. And then you're left with common ground and the music, which is at the heart of all of it. So, maybe it's the optimism in it, but hopefully people can get exposed to it and things. And then when things start to turn around, you can go, cool, now check this out, and then like see what it open to everything else, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think also because this is such a devastating time that we kind of have to say, okay, it's okay to be upset, it's okay to not be productive, but when we need to do something to make ourselves feel better, to brighten spirits, that the art is there and the opportunity is there. And I think that that's really important, especially for you guys with your students, because they are at that age where so many opportunities are probably seemingly not even an option anymore. You know, for so many of them, they need to have something they can cling on to. And for so many of us, that is music in whatever form we can get it.
So to say, because you've been kind of mentioning it, sorry, Maris, I think this is where you're going anyway, but you've been mentioning it and kind of that idea of keeping the music in there, the libretto that you wrote.
Yeah.
Can you give us, I know you have composers looking at it and things like that, but can you tell us a little more about it? Like where in the boredom did it get born out of, and where did it take you?
Well, so yeah, I have not a ton of downtime in my life, but I have had this idea ruminating in my head for years. And I'd actually kind of pitched it to a couple composers, and one of them actually said, well, get me a librettist and have them write it, and then I'll consider it. Well, that's a lot to do, to be like, I'll get someone to do this project for me, and I probably have to pay them something, I would imagine, and then you might look at it. Well, that's, you know, story of our lives, right, as musicians. But at the same time, I was like, okay, so in my past life, pre-COVID, I would have said, okay, I really like the way this person writes. I'm going to ask them to do it. Now, I thought, hey, you've always been really good at writing. Why don't you try it? Why don't you see what happens? No one's going to get what you want out of it better than you do. So I decided, okay, well, the thing that I always wanted to, the role I've always wanted to play ever since I was an adult, really, is Lady Macbeth. So Lady Macbeth is super powerful and super manipulative and important, but she is not the main character. And I wanted to make her the main character. So I wrote this one-act opera libretto based on Lady Macbeth and her interaction with the three weird sisters that does not exist in Macbeth, and basically her life in between the scenes that you see her in Macbeth. So it's short, it's concise, it's to the point, but I don't think it's blunt. I think it's well fleshed out. There's more to it than that, but it's a passion project. I thought, you know, no one's offering me the Verdi Macbeth. No one's offering me Shostakovich. I'm going to do my own. And I'm going to make it more interesting to myself. And hopefully, with the right composer, even better for me than it would be for one of the others. That being said, I still wouldn't turn down the others. But, you know, I thought, you know, I'm almost 40 years old. My birthday's at the end of the month. What am I waiting around for? This is a perfect time. So this is a perfect time. Let's write this, and hopefully it becomes something, you know, and it's very women focused. There are 5 characters, and they are all women. And I didn't set out to write a feminist piece, but it is a feminist piece, very much so. And it's something that I think is missing in the canon. So hopefully that's something that, you know, we can take and grow from and make it something that maybe ideally, you know, small colleges could do something like this, because there are always an abundance of women and fewer and fewer men that can fill the roles, you know, so they're always looking for women heavy operas. And frankly, people get sick of playing nuns. So, you know, there's only so much out there. So hopefully this is something that will become something. I don't have a time frame in mind. I don't really care about a time frame right now. Right now, it's just something that I hope goes deeper and gets fleshed out more and becomes a piece of art. So right now it's standalone. I could probably call it a play, but I want the music. So, yeah.
I have to just comment, because it's a theme I think that keeps coming back up in several, if not all, of your responses. you have a vision that you want to do something, and then if the opportunity doesn't exist, you either find the alternate path or you create the opportunity for yourself. And I think that's just such an, admirable quality to have in really any kind of career or life, frankly, because it applies everywhere. And it's just a theme. I caught it in your first
Say the
answer. You have hustle. That
there you
one.
go.
Well,
It's becoming like a recurring word over the course of them. So
Yes.
I appreciate that a lot because, I
Yeah.
was quite the introvert for a very long time. And I decided early on, through much guidance from my father, probably a middle school age, junior high age, that if I wanted to be successful, I was going to have to put myself out there and make sure people remembered who I was and just kind of hustle all the time. He actually told me at some point, be prepared for success to be 99% failure. And that 1% is that success that you work hard for. We always say follow your dreams and pursue your passions, but people don't realize how much work that is sometimes. And, you guys both probably have those students that are so good, and that they're wonderful and they're your top students, and you're sending them to your best schools for college, and they're not going to always be the best there, and it's going to devastate them. But at the same time, if they can rise above that and still keep going on, then they can make it. If those are the people that, they get pushed down and they keep coming back up. And if you hit a wall, you walk around it, you find a way around it. That's something I've worked on with my voice teacher vocally, to get past the hurdles that I create for myself all the time, to do what I have to do to navigate instead of just hitting a wall over and over and over again, figuring out what the problem is so that I can go around it and find a different path.
I think it's, again, just so interesting hearing you say this because we've interviewed several people at this point. You're actually our third one tonight. And
wow.
Obviously we're reaching out to people who have had a certain amount of success in the field, and the story that we keep hearing it's the same one. And I think it's an important message, and I'm just emphasizing it because I think it's so important.
And to that, I think that I totally agree. To that point, we know that most of our audience initially, and the momentary audience, is hopefully professionals in the field and things like that. But to be able to give them something to take to their students is really important. And we talk about all the time. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse how wonderful the internet and things like that are, because you have access to people of all ages and every walk of life doing anything on the internet and having success with it. And it's easy to watch a video and not think about the 99% of the failures that went before it and go, "Ooh, I want to do that." And you go, but do you get what they did to get there? And they don't, because they can just click another video and keep going. And there's aspirations and dreams are fantastic and they're needed and they're necessary. But to have people that have pushed through that, to hear so many people consistently, the common theme is the acceptance of there will be failure, and the acceptance of maybe we need to spend less time absorbing other people doing it and more time pushing to make that our own craft in that way. And I think it's so important for them to start to hear more and more.
I think so too. I think the other thing I kind of just want to emphasize is that if you want to be an artist, and not just a singer or just an instrumentalist, but an artist, you have to have something unique about you. You have to have something that makes you different, whatever that might be. And it might be your path and the experiences you have. It might be your approach to something. It could be any number of things. But if you don't have some of those bad things happen, you don't learn from them, and you don't grow, and you don't become a better individual who can bring those life experiences to your art. And that's so important, because otherwise you're a cookie cutter. You sound like everybody else, you look like everybody else. If you succeed at, straight out of college, that's awesome, but at some point you're going to have to grow, or else you become boring. So, I hope in my life that I just never become boring or stagnant. I want to constantly grow and develop and try new things, and I will fail at them. I am sure many, many, many of them. I'm a perfectionist, so that's really hard for me. But in other ways, it's really good too, because being so type A and being a perfectionist means that I'm willing to keep working until I get to where I want to be. So, you know, it sometimes looks really good on paper or on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, but there's so much work behind everything you see. And I agree with you, like, you know, the attention span of people for those videos where they see something happen is like 20 seconds. So, you know, if you're doing amazing things in 20 seconds and then you click onto something else, you're right. There are years behind those 20 seconds most of the time.
And there's two sides to that. There's the act of finding that 20 seconds enjoyment and moving on to the next 20, but then also as a performer, being okay to work that hard for 20 seconds, giving someone 20 seconds of that. And that's, I mean, and again, we've all been there. We've all made that decision because we're in the careers that we're in, but that's part of it. Like, I mean, how much time do you spend on a show that equates to the amount of times you perform it? And it's not equal, and it's not necessarily fair, but that's the way that it works.
Yeah. There has to be some self-fulfillment, I think, you know, and if you're not excited to go to rehearsals and you're not excited to practice, it's probably not the field for you. You know, you can always be a musician and play for fun. But if this is, you know, if you don't love the work, probably not for a career choice, because the money doesn't pay for it. I mean, you're not going to make the money as a musician in any way unless you're super, super successful. And that is so rare. And so you have to love it. You have to love it more than anything else and be willing to sacrifice for it. Yeah. So
I think that's like just a wonderful kind of bookend to everything you have been talking about thus far. So before we go here, do you have any like media, or where can people find you if they want more Kirsten?
Sure. More Kirsten. Okay, so my Instagram is Diva Voce. You know, so it's super easy. Diva Voce. It has been my handle for everything since I was 12 years old and had an AOL account. So, so I think I still have an AOL account. I don't use it much. Facebook, Kirsten C. Kunkle, soprano, and Wilmington Concert Opera for both Facebook and Instagram. You can search it and it'll pop up. YouTube, I have both for me and for the company. And if you Google my name, you will probably find my website as well. So it's just kirstencunkle.com. I'm on Spotify. I have like 7 monthly listeners, so that's exciting. I did an Naxos recording and it came out not that long ago, so that's pretty exciting.
Awesome.
I'm on Spotify. But yeah, it's, you know, opera is not a career where you go for recognition. You go for the love of it, and I love it. I love everything I get to do, and it's worth all the work. It absolutely is. Yeah.
Well, and for people listening, if you have listened and you've loved what you've heard and you want to hear what Kirsten has done in terms of all this stuff, we'll also put links and descriptions in the bio or the description for this episode as well. So you'll be able to click links and find social media, find websites, all that good stuff and stuff like that. So thank you so much for hanging out with us after a rehearsal, I hear too. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Wow. I wanted to say congratulations like multiple times after every answer. Wow, congratulations. So on everything. Incredible.
Thank you so much. And congratulations to you guys too. This is taking off and I think it's really exciting, and I'll tell people about it, and working with the company, the publishing company too. That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.